Pastor Trey Comstock. We'll begin with our scripture of the week, Genesis chapter 45, verses 3 through 11, and then verse 15. And then Pastor Scott Gatchot, Pastor Emily Larson, and I will talk scripture, and more specifically about the power of forgiveness. But first, a reading from Genesis chapter 45, verses 3 through 11, and verse 15. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and the lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry, go to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all you have will not come to poverty.' And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after this, his brothers talked with him." So this is not the main point, but this is a remarkable illustration of what I think it actually means for all things to work together for your good. And that is not means that everything happens to you. This is from Romans chapter 8. This is not that everything that is good happens to you, or everything that happens to you is good, or that God really made them do that. No, God didn't make them do that. They did that. And what they did was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What they did was very, very wrong, and really hurt Joseph for a while. Joseph, being Joseph, one of the best children of the Bible, makes it work, and God is with him. But this is a wonderful, he has gotten to this place where he can see how this really bad thing that happened to him, that was definitely bad, ended up working out for everyone's good. But this does not give you the right to, sell your brother into slavery and look at him and go, "It's probably going to work out for you."
This idea of the providence of God isn't that God causes all these things to get you to a place. Is more than, okay, in God's grace, he can take situations when he's allowed and utilize them to get you to a positive place. And that's very different than God's causing this to drive you to a positive place. At no point, I was reading something where this individual was trying to take the idea of slavery and talk about the providence of God being a blessing. What are you talking about, dude? No, not at all. At this point, are there blessings that maybe have happened? Yes, but it isn't because of that. It's only because
it's because of human resilience.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It is because God can take a terrible, horrific situation, whether, in an individual case or across, any number of horrific crimes across history, and through God's power moving in people, both as individuals and collectively, a tremendous solidarity can be born out of horrific suffering.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it was really good that we all suffered.
Yeah.
It just means that okay, God could take this human inflicted harm, and because of God's power, God's grace, and God is the ultimate 3D chess master, God can counter your the movement of evil with something positive. But humanity would all be better off if we all just did less evil to each other.
Yes.
Yes.
It's in spite of, not because
Right.
of type thing.
Right. Well, and this is where the church can have a better story of why do bad things happen in the world,
Sure, yeah,
right?
to
Mhm.
Daryl Tongren's, Van Tongren's point to
Yes.
us a few weeks back. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. So he spoke about how we just needed to have a better dialogue about human suffering, right? We needed to have a better idea
Yeah.
of why does God let bad things happen? Well, no, we live in a broken world. Joseph's brothers did bad stuff, right?
Bad.
Bad things. We can all agree, right? Look at Job. We can look at this story specifically as a micro study of, yes, bad things happen, but Joseph remained faithful and God can redeem this situation. And Joseph chose here at this point to choose grace and redemption.
And,
Well,
and
and
let's
also
not forget.
Joseph, the brothers aren't looking at Joseph and saying, well, Joseph, this worked out great for you, didn't it? This
Right.
is Joseph after a long spiritual journey, after the
Mhm.
experience has been redeemed, after he can see himself in a place with purpose and meaning, when he's not imprisoned, when he's
Right.
not trying to be killed by Potiphar's wife, right? When
Right.
Yeah.
he has overcome, he's become Lord of all Egypt. And so at that point, he can look back and go, well, you know, because of this thing that you did, you don't need to feel bad about it now, because God has redeemed this experience for me. It's part of the forgiveness. But I want to be clear, this is Joseph claiming this for Joseph,
Yes.
which is very different from a brother looking at Joseph and literally saying, well, you're Lord of all Egypt now, so I guess it's worked out.
Right.
And let's
Very
put it in a
different.
little bit more perspective, because the selling off of Joseph wasn't the first intended plan. He was being left to die.
Right, yeah, yes.
Yes.
Let's sell him instead. And they didn't just show up and Joseph go, hey, brothers, there was this little play of things where they had made several trips back and forth from Canaan to here and had been accused of treachery, had been accused of stealing from him. And so they were terrified of this individual that they didn't know he was their brother.
Right.
And then when he gives this revelation, an epiphany moment there to them, I'm pretty sure they said something that would fare well in our other podcast more than here.
Right.
That was like, yeah, we're definitely in trouble.
And I think we brought this up on this show before, because I think we did I think last year, I think we did the where Benjamin's stuck there, and that part of it, and then this shows up in the lectionary this year. So they probably didn't recognize him because he's an Egyptian high official, so he's wearing hella makeup. Right. He's got the Egyptian eye black. He,
a lot older than when they last
style.
saw him.
He different manner of dress. He is an Egyptian high official and most likely dressed as one. And so he looks like, what you see, painted on the fronts of mummies, right? With the, Egyptians love, Egyptians real big into makeup tutorials, the Egyptians. Egyptians would do great on YouTube and TikTok because they have a lot of, very, intense makeup. And so they're really it's not just because when he leaves home is a lovely euphemism. When he gets sold into slavery, he's fairly grown. And so physically, he's probably not that different. And so you go I would know my brother anywhere. It helps that my brother is literally just the 150% version of me, where he is, taller, more muscular, very deep voice, talks like this. But we look shockingly similar. So you think I would know, I would think, I would know Drew anywhere. Probably not if he is, dressed like an Egyptian pharaoh with hella eye makeup.
Right.
And your context is he's probably dead,
right, he's probably
or somewhere way far away.
Right.
Definitely not in Egypt. Definitely not the man in charge of everything.
Right, yeah, definitely not the Lord of all Egypt, right?
The second in charge. Yep.
The second in charge, the prime minister of Egypt. This,
Vice Pharaoh.
Right. I mean, Joseph, shout
Indeed.
out, shout outs to Joseph. He's a real one of just all, and he gets there again. He is like Joseph is the prototype for how do you live in exile, right? Remember, a lot of
Yes.
scripture and the things that get highlighted, even in Genesis, are shaped by the story of exile. And shaped by a people that often found itself under the thumb of other rulers. This is, Joseph and Daniel are Joseph, Daniel, Esther, all that the version of how do we survive in exile? How do we survive in a nation that isn't ours? By being really competent and really faithful.
Really, really faithful. Yeah. And Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego also
Shadrach,
in that
Meshach.
list.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so here's like a really early story. This is Genesis. So, this is, not just early in the plot, but even early in being written down. Daniel and Esther way later.
Right.
Kind of some of the later biblical literature that we have, the Old Testament biblical literature that we have. And it is this this was a really common theme, because this is a thing that keeps happening to God's people, is they keep finding themselves through a combination of circumstance and mistake and whatever, right, finding themselves as people in a strange land and having to deal in a universe, in a thought world, in a universe that assumed nation, land, God, all the same.
Right.
What do you do when you're not in nation and land? Like, what does that look like to interact with God? And Joseph is one of the early figures, and he's a lot better at this than Abraham is. Lot better at this than Abraham is. I would love to know what Abraham would have done with Potiphar's wife. Because it's probably not what Joseph did, which was absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
There's. I think we have the answer.
Yeah, I think we have the answer, because it's what he did with Sarah. Anyway,
right.
But I think an interesting thing here too is when you look at the fact that they're coming from where they're supposed to be and going to Egypt.
Yeah.
Going to Egypt to essentially beg. And we see a wonderful example of forgiveness, but I think there's important things to look at this forgiveness. I'm not necessarily saying his little testing and all was of the world's best way of doing it, but he doesn't immediately put himself back into a situation of where they have control over him. There's forgiveness, but there's also him being wise about the reestablishment of that relationship first. And I think people get that. So, especially people in abusive relationships, well, forgiveness means I just jump right back. No, forgiveness means you're not going to hold vengeance against them. You're not going to allow what they did to continue to tear you up. But it doesn't mean that you immediately reestablish that relationship exactly where it was. It doesn't mean you put yourself back into a vulnerable position. And I think we see some aspects of Joseph doing that. He's testing things before, he gives that forgiveness, but then he doesn't just immediately go back to that same situation.
Well, he doesn't go home. He does not go back to his father's house.
Right.
And even in this, I'm going to provide to not forgive would have been said, I am not going to, you are dying. I am not going to stop you from dying because you hurt me.
Yeah.
Right. That would have been the holding in unforgiveness.
Well, then
that
hurry up and die.
I have the power to stop a harm from them happening, and I won't stop the harm from happening.
Right.
And so that's the kind of the pure forgiveness part. Again, you're right. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean the relationship has to be restored. And even in what he lays out, there's very clear boundaries. You will live near me in the land of Goshen. We are not going back into one household.
Right.
We will not be a household. We will not be a family compound. Right? You will be near me. Go tell my father I'm alive, right? I want to be in relationship with you. But I, Joseph, Lord of all Egypt, am going to define this relationship. And this is because his father is still alive. Therefore, rightly, he could go back and live in his father's house.
Yeah.
And he does not do that.
Right. Well,
you
and
will live near me.
there's also that testing to see if their character has changed with the
Right,
younger brother, with Benjamin, and so there is some like double checking of, hey, are y'all going to sacrifice this younger brother just like you sacrificed me? Like,
Yep.
what's going on?
You willing to sell
And
him into slavery?
right. Kind of checking in on their hearts. So there is some little checks and balances there. But there's no groveling from the brothers. There's no asking for forgiveness either written down here. There is fear on the brothers' part.
True.
But there's no, so he has already decided to forgive them before they ask for it.
So there is,
also.
Yeah, we see more emotional response from him than we ever do from the brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is like, you're right that like, in terms of reestablishing the relationship, he's like, hey, are y'all any different? And the answer is yes, they are somewhat different.
Right.
But also, it is still Joseph offering something that these dudes don't deserve.
Right.
Nope.
These dudes don't deserve it. And so as we are wrestling in our own souls to forgive, recognize that the person that we're wrestling to forgive may never get to that place. May never have that like really nice moment where you can look and go, yeah, I forgive you, and you are clearly so radically different. Right. It may well be this person is, in the case of the brothers, they are different, maybe not different enough, but somewhat different. And so that's where forgiveness and relationship rebuilding, which are two different things. Maybe they're on the same spectrum, but they are two different things. But they are not all the way different. And when we are doing our own work of forgiveness, it is starting with the fact that the person that we are the person, entity, beings, collective, whatever, that we are thinking about forgiving may not be that different at all from who they were when they harmed us.
Right.
It's also important to realize forgiveness isn't saying what was done, what's needing to be forgiven was okay.
Right.
Yes.
And that's not just me, oh, hey, here's a good pill. We see that in the scripture. You meant this for evil.
Right.
He calls them on it. You sold me into slavery. You meant it
more
for
than
evil.
Once, right? Like it's a refrain.
Yeah, yes. And it's like, hey, you weren't doing this for anybody's good. But in spite of that, God's grace then took and brought me to a place that this is a benefit.
Yeah, I'm going to be...
Regardless of what you did, I'm going to forgive you because I'm not going to continue to allow that to destroy me.
Or not destroy me, or destroy you, right? Like he is going to, again, I think when we talked about the earlier part of the scripture, it's probably a year ago now, but whenever we did, like, he could just kill them.
Right.
He could just...
And no one would question it.
And no one would question it.
Pharaoh wouldn't care, and he's the only one who could have questioned him.
And he's not one of Pharaoh's subjects. This food is not rightly theirs. He knows they're not Pharaoh's subjects. They don't recognize him. He could have just walked in, gone, this is a storehouse. This is a government storehouse, right? There are guards. This is a government storehouse during a famine. There are guards.
Oh, yeah.
You can guarantee it. Yeah.
Right. And keep in mind that in this point in history, Egypt is one of the world's greatest, if not the greatest.
They are the world power.
Right. And Joseph is the Lord of all Egypt. Joseph has control of the most powerful and most modern military on the planet at that moment.
Yep.
He is like the second most powerful person in the world. Right.
Yes.
Like, and so it's again, like, and he's gotten there on merit, and he's gotten there on faithfulness. Shout out to Joseph, better person than I am. And he doesn't just say off with their heads.
Right.
I think he definitely, yes.
He certainly could have. Yeah.
Could have.
Easily.
And in an earthly logic, in a logic grounded in our baser instincts, in a logic grounded in what underlines like worldly law, right? There's an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
Right.
Lex talionis, right? Like, you harm, you get harmed. And he is in a blessed position to be judge, jury, and executioner.
Mm-hmm.
And logical to some degree.
Right.
We need to take care of the people within our own country first. Let's just
Who
kill
didn't
them.
sell
Don't let
me
them
into slavery.
Right, exactly.
Right. Well, and I think that's what speaks to the character of Joseph so
Yeah.
much more, that he chose forgiveness.
Right.
So who was it that said that forgiveness is setting free a prisoner and then realizing that the prisoner was you?
I don't know, but
Right?
I don't know, but it works out.
Right?
The not forgive is to drink poison, expect the other person to die.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Precisely, right? So this character development of Joseph, it's this kind of the final chapter of all of these things he's gone through, all of this faithfulness that we've seen from Joseph. And then he is going to choose righteousness. He is going to choose grace and forgiveness when he did not have to.
No.
Right. And he absolutely saves them. We have this perspective because, Genesis is telling the story of a people. And so you are rooting for the people to make it. Right.
Right.
Again, that is Genesis is setting up. We are not Jews, but setting up the protagonist of Genesis is God's people. How do we go from there being nothing in existence to there being a people, and to that people being in Egypt, right? Because you've got to get Genesis has the hard duty that in 40 something chapters to go from non-existence,
absolutely nothing,
to a people that are God's people, alive but in Egypt. Because that's what we're going to pick up, where the story picks up in Exodus next.
Yeah, and it talks about right here that they prosper and they keep growing and growing and growing. And then there was a Pharaoh who did not remember Joseph.
And now we jump into how long, oh Lord, are we going to suffer under this horrific Pharaoh? Enter Moses, who actually, this is out of sync. You won't see any of this thing in time, but there's an episode of Cut the Crap that we're going to be recording tomorrow, where I'm going to be talking a lot about Moses and Joshua. Anyways, because we're going to talk about the nature of Scripture and but so that's how you get there. But so we are rooting for God's people because we know them to be the protagonist of this book.
Right.
But it is a reminder that even within God's people, we all vary in quality.
Yeah.
We produce our Josephs.
Very much. Oh my gosh.
We produce the brothers.
Just look at this thing. I mean, you've got all kind of crazy situations. Noah getting drunk and
and things.
Things happen.
Things. We're not going to discuss Ham.
No, Ham's
things happen.
Shout out to Shem, though.
I mean, yes, no doubt. You've got all kinds of crazy. Moses. Ultimately a murderer. As was Paul.
As we've alluded to, Abraham pimps at his wife twice.
Yes.
For political safety.
Problematic, yeah.
And
Jacob,
takes on the handmaiden. I mean,
Jacob steals the blessing.
Right.
This is not again part of the
problematic people God uses.
Right, and
thank goodness.
Thank goodness. This is one again. I say this over and over again. It's one of the things I love about Scripture is how remarkably realistic it is about the human condition, and you get the because we tell these stories like they're hero stories. We tell them all like they're hero stories. Right. This is years ago. I wrote my series "Speed Dating the Old Testament," and one of the messages of speed dating the Old Testament is let's look at these people for real. Let's look at them in. Like holistically, let's not just pull the parts of the Noah story that we like,
or Samson. Samson was so purient. Problematic.
Just absolutely purient. It's the nicest way. It's the nicest thing I can say about him, actually.
He's so more beautiful and worth more than 100.
Yeah,
sins.
He's also an idiot.
Yes,
dumb as a bag of hammers.
Someone once described him to me as like take a Bible story but make it in Florida. Have y'all seen this yet? And Samson is
No, but I'm
like,
totally Googling it now.
Samson's like, guy goes and beats, neighbors with a jaw of a donkey bone, with the jaw of an ass, or is really, really strong until his girlfriend's or until his baby mama cuts off his mullet.
Right.
And I'm like,
yes.
okay, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Right, because we're getting to that point of Judges where they are actively degrading in quality. The whole point of Judges is that, as we see with the variability when God's people are individuals,
right?
So we see when God's people are people. And this is where to remember that this is about all of us, not just a particular kind of people. Lord knows the amount of anti-Semitism that has been justified. And it's just like, nope, this is just people. This is just any people in a relationship with God are going to vary in equality. That includes us.
Yep. Incredibly.
That includes us.
Yeah, if only we could just lay it at the feet of everyone else. But every day, week, month, we do something as idiotic and anti to what we should be doing.
And so where this scripture hits me for this time is we're in a moment as a world, as a country, as a society, as a something, where just the divides and the harms are mounting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to know how to fix that.
Right.
I don't. But the fixing it feels impossible. It feels like the chasm, calling it a divide feels mild. The chasm that is opened feels unbridgeable. Yeah. And I don't know how to fix it. And so I offer this scripture and kind of this approach to this scripture, and it's called the sermon titles, the spoilers, it's the reality of forgiveness. All the things in the series are the reality of something. Last week was the reality of justice. This is the reality of forgiveness. Right. And that is the chasm between Joseph and his brothers is massive.
Incredibly.
They
should be
ruined
insurmountable.
His life.
Yes.
And then by God's grace and Joseph's own faithfulness, he and God unruined his life.
Right.
And he ends up Lord of all Egypt with a great house and amazing makeup. But you have the people who tried to kill you, failed at killing you, and so short of killing you, sold you to slavers off to a foreign land, subjected you to all kinds of hellacious treatment, and his response is, I'm going to feed you, I'm going to test you, I'm going to see that you are maybe not different enough, but a little bit different. And I'm going to reestablish a relationship with you. And I think, and Joseph is meant to be held up to us as a moral exemplar.
Yeah.
He is one of the good guys. He is one of the least problematic figures in the entire Old Testament. In the way that New Testament Joseph, also one of the least problematic figures in the New Testament. He's great. Both the Josephs, when you see a Joseph...
Little Joey from the block did a good job.
It's a key. This is a good boy. He's great. And so we have this moral exemplar. I don't pretend to have Joseph's ability at forgiveness, but we see here a biblical story of a massive chasm being closed via forgiveness and via an effort to reestablish a relationship that had been destroyed at no fault of Joseph's, or essentially no fault of Joseph's. He's just being a teenager.
Right. Well, and this is a good example that nothing is beyond the redemptive grace of God, right? Nothing is beyond God's redemption. God can redeem literally anything, any broken relationship, any broken situation, any of the muck that you find yourself stuck in, God can be there with you through it all.
And so these wounds can be healed.
Yes.
I don't know what that looks like. But when I have those hopeless moments, I think we recorded one live on air, right? Like we aired a hopeless moment. You know, and part of why we did that, it's on the channel, look it up. Why we did that was in some ways to narrate that it's okay for this moment to feel hopeless and to, you know, feel weird. But I also know that even since I had us record that, I feel differently than I did then. Right? Like I feel, I see more of the human complexity. That it doesn't mean that I've healed the chasms in my own mind. But I am reminded about the fundamental complexity of humanity, that no one is just one thing. And there's a lot of confounding issues, whatever, right? Like there's a lot that feeds into this.
Right.
And so this particular scripture and this particular moment and how I'm approaching it is not that, and now we just all need to be like Joseph and heal the people who we think did and afraid the people who we think did bad stuff. I mean, we knew that already.
Yeah.
It is see the gap that should exist between the two parties here. And understand that through Joseph's profound faithfulness, he forgives them and prevents worse harm from happening to them, saves their lives, even as they sought to end his, and even has it in him to reestablish a relationship with boundaries. And so that tells me it's possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
Or
nothing is irredeemable.
I choose to see in this, much like Jesus, I think we bring this up last week recently. We mentioned Jesus forgiving the people who tried to kill him, who are not tried, succeeded in killing him.
Actively were killing him.
Actively killing him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Right. But here's I'm not Jesus, right? So with that one, I can go, well, I'm not Jesus. Thank God.
But Joseph.
But
Joseph,
exactly,
just a dude.
Joseph's just a dude.
Just a dude.
Just a faithful
who went
dude.
through a lot of crap, wrongfully imprisoned because of what was done to him. And then because of God's grace into his life, extends that forgiveness, which is all we're all called to.
Right.
Yes.
It's okay to understand we're not always okay. That we can move on from our brokenness. We don't want to stay there, but there'll be times that we're there. And even in the midst of that, it's still okay to realize that we can forgive others even when they're not perfect yet.
Well, and we're seeing him at the end of the process.
Yeah.
And so we don't know when this became his general view.
Right.
And maybe it didn't until he saw them before him and it was like, well, right. We don't know, right? Like a long time has passed. Years have
lots
passed.
Of issues, ups and downs.
And there was even back and forth in at the end there where they had to go back and forth between Canaan and there. Right. So he had time once he saw them until he
time they came up before him.
Something like that.
Right.
And this is, again, we're at the tail end of his story. And so he's been a slave. He's been, imprisoned. He's risen to power. He's had time to build up these storehouses, right? Like this is years.
This is not a short redemptive arc. This is a long redemptive arc.
There were 7 years of good producing.
Right.
That they stored up. And then they're 2 years into the famine.
Right. So don't quote me on this, but we're a decade into this thing, buddy.
At least.
Easily.
He is he's now at minimum in his late 20s.
Right.
Like everybody else in the Bible, probably his early 30s. It's like everybody. Everybody's the like
Except
late,
Moses.
late teens, never quite as young as you think. And then through their and then they're dead by 45. Sorry, Scott. I know that's tough to hear.
Hey, I'm beating the odds then.
You're beating the odds. Emily's closer than I am. I was younger than Jesus when I started in this business. Anyways, I digress. So also understand that this was not even as portrayed here in the Bible as one of the Bible's true human superheroes, who were not also the Son of God.
Right.
Yeah.
It took a long time, man.
Yeah.
At the end of the arc, when it's all said and done, when Joseph could see how his life has played out, he could find it to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that shows that it's possible.
Yeah.
It shows also that it's not easy.
Yes.
Because he doesn't make this process look easy.
No.
This isn't just snap the fingers and it's done. And as Scott rightly pointed out at the stop, like the relationship doesn't go back to what it was.
Right.
It merely has the possibility of something as more healing is found.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the reasons I pulled this story is it's beautifully complex.
Yeah.
This is not a simple fairy story of, and always forgive, kids. It's like, I know he really hurt you, but you need to forgive. We knew that. But we see this biblical superhero struggle with it, manage to do it after a long time of healing, to be able to find it and continue to set the example for us of what is possible.
Yes.
Because it doesn't feel that way. We live in a world that does not feel like it's just coming back together. Because at this point the harms or the perceived harms, the whatever, like it's just mountain. Like
they're just big. Yeah.
Oh, and and we have the hatred machine, the internet, the social media, it's the hatred machine. And we're just pouring more, constant harm out in the universe. Fun fact before we go. So they have back in the very, very early days of the internet, when it was still like the DARPAnet, right? Like we're talking it's just
the bulletin board,
green screen.
This is giant mini computers that are the size of a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Where you had it was just at universities and defense installations. You're talking the 60s. Okay?
Yeah.
So we have all of the logs of all of the internet DARPAnet conversations back then, because
it was on cards, and the cards were
right. So we have the logs of their early messages, and you know what? They were already having pitched inappropriately angry, dehumanized arguments with each other. It is innate to the format that because there is not another visible person on the other side of it, they were already having flame wars in the 60s.
Oh my gosh.
It is something about the nature of digital communication that encourages humanity's, that it's always
the
in
worst
us, but humanity's inhumanity to humanity.
Oh my gosh.
I forget, as ever, I forget what book I read this. It was this interesting book about describing the internet as a physical place of how does it all actually connect together, and how do these and it was this journalist trying to figure out what is internet. And so we dug into the early DARPAnet stuff and ARPANET stuff, and it was already flame wars in the 60s. We've always been doing it, and yet God can heal.
Nothing
as we
new
see,
under the sun.
God heals at an extremely wide divide.
Mm-hmm.
When people choose to follow God's example, and and lean on the spiritual resources that are available. That's Joseph's great strength, is leaning on the spiritual resources that are available.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds a way to do it. And so it is possible, even if it doesn't feel that way. Anyways, if you have thoughts on forgiveness or just want to send us mean emails, Lord knows,
Lean into the dark.
anytime one of our shorts get over a certain number of views, I have an argument with an angry atheist on the internet. That is just like, and I haven't figured out what the exact threshold is, but it's somewhere around 250 views. At 250 views on a short, there will be at least one argument with an angry atheist on the internet, who, or in some cases, an angry evangelical adjacent pastor who should probably know better, depending.
You would think.
That was the one who called me a sodomite. I keep coming back to this. It's just the funniest comment we've gotten.
So
ever.
bizarre. So bizarre.
It's like,
how bizarre.
It's like I don't think we were even talking about like LGBTQ inclusion. Like, we're not talking about anything. Just looked at picture of me on the internet, of my dumb face, and thought, that's a sodomite. I'm like, what?
People are crazy. The internet, man.
The internet, right?
It's a place for flame wars.
Yeah, and so, you know, I of course, I choose to engage all of these things. They are all making disingenuous arguments, and I engage with them entirely ingenuously. So if you want to have an entirely disingenuous argument in which all I give you back is totally genuine responses to your critiques, email us thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. That is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. You can also post comments in all the other places we live, at Divine Provisions Co. on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on YouTube, on Facebook. YouTube's where we get most of them, frankly. It's just wild out there.
It's a weird place.
Thank you to all the nice people who just post nice things on our Facebook.
Right.
We have the only positive Facebook audience out there. Thank you to our Facebook audience.
Thank you.
Y'all are very kind. None of you have looked at this dumb face and went, that, at least said on the internet, that's a sodomite.
Or called you a bozo.
But I love Bozo. I do love Bozo Take.
Bozo Take.
In terms of just like backhanded, just like slightly mean, but kind of funny. Or, oh shoot, I was told I looked like somebody else that I was like, I mean, yeah, it's usually like Syndrome from The
Incredibles.
The Incredibles.
It wasn't that one, but I had to Google it, and all I could post back was like, I mean, yeah. I get Seth Rogen sometimes. Like, it was something I don't remember. I'll have to go back and look who it was. But it was just like, you look like, it looks like, I didn't know that guy was a pastor. I'm like, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Like, I can't. If it's factual, I can't. I can't deny that one. Anyways, if you want to post what dumb celebrity you think I look like,
right? Or Emily or I.
Yep.
Or I don't know why.
Don't leave us out of the picking and poking.
I'm the one who got Bozo Take. I'm the one who got called.
That's going to be my new definition of B-roll, by the way.
Compared to a celebrity that I did actually look like, and I had to go, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And actually, that person, we had a perfectly polite interaction, because I think I replied like, I mean, yeah, and we had a perfectly polite interaction. It was fine. They were just being the internet funny, which is like Bozo Take, which is, there's the sodomite one that is clearly stuck in my craw of like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Anyways, we are the Divine Provisions Co. and we need your help. God, we need your help.
Yeah.
Help us, please.
Like, comment. Honestly, comment with whatever. Just understand that the only thing you're going to get back is either genuine thanks or a genuine response to a disingenuous argument. Like, comment, subscribe, leave us 5-star reviews in Apple Podcast. Share something you found meaningful. We do shorts to really facilitate that. Of like, hey, here's a thing that these people said that I found meaningful. Maybe you'll find it meaningful too. All of that helps this go further, and it thus helps it be more sustainable. If you want to financially support what we do, the stuff ain't free. And so there is a donate button at divineprovisions.co. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord. And we'll see you next time.